Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to the second lecture of the course CSE 145, Introduction to Computing. I'm Saeed Ghani. So let us start by reviewing the first lecture. Normally, what I'll do is in every class, I will give you a set of slides which will be a review of the first lecture, very brief review. We will initially, in the next few lectures, we will also be doing introductions, and then I will go into the main topics of this lecture today, which is looking at some of the complexity of the algorithm, then Python programming, and then we'll have some more simple examples. Okay. So to start with a review of the previous lecture, now you'll notice that when I have a review, I basically have a little R at the top. Okay, so what that means is that this is not a new slide, it's a revision slide from the previous lecture. Okay, so so this is just for information. And we talked about the calendar the last lecture. We spoke about the different algorithm examples and the running time, the efficiency of an algorithm in terms of the running time and the amount of space taken. And then we looked at example 1A, okay, which was an unsorted number search. So in other words, we had a list of numbers and these were not sorted in any particular order. And the issue was, can you find a number X? Okay, so if you're given a number X, can you find that in that list? And the issue would be, how would you actually write an algorithm to be able to find that number? Okay, so we're going to be taking a closer look at this today before we go into other algorithms, and also look at the complexity of this case, simple case, and we'll also look at a Python implementation of this. So we'll spend some time going over Python programming and then see how we can implement this in Python. Okay, so basically, in this case, we had defined n as the length of this list. So you can see the length of this list is 5. And then we said that there are indices. We defined I as the index. Okay, so I was the index of this list. So I went from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the elements of that list were given by this format. So list sub I, we refer to this as list sub I typically. I'll refer to it that way. And that would mean the ith element of that list. Okay, so the 0th element of that list was 10. The first element of that list was 3. The second element was 5. The third element was 20. And the fourth element was 6. Okay, so this represents the fourth element of that list. And so we had a flow diagram. Okay, so this is referred to as a flow diagram. And this sort of at a very high level represents the algorithm that can be used to be able to figure out whether X is present or not. Okay, so what we did was we went through comparisons and went through increments, and we had a terminating condition. And at the end, we would either print an I, which would be the index where the number X was found. So in this case, we would expect that it would give you the number 2, okay? And it would say true as a result that, yes, it was able to find the number 5 in that list. And in case it wasn't able to find the number 5 in that list, then it would return a false. Okay, so that was the algorithm that we looked at last time. And then we did a reverse search. In other words, earlier we were searching in the forward direction from going from index 0 to 4. Now the reverse search basically says, that's just for illustration purposes, that if you want to go in the reverse direction, how would you implement it? Okay, so you had to make some small changes in the way the algorithm was running. So instead of starting from I is equal to 0, we started from I is equal to n minus 1. Now, you might recall that why is it n minus 1 and not n? And you might recall we said that we start from 0. So even though the length of the list is 5, excuse me, the maximum index number is 4, and the index numbers go from 0 to 4. All right. So we start from I is equal to n minus 1, and we compare it and we decrement it. So this was the decrement operator in Python. And if it is less than 0, we basically say that we haven't been able to find this number, and we print out the result, and we give the result as false. So this was last week's lecture. And any questions about that before we begin today's lecture? Any confusion as far as this was
Can you
concerned?
just repeat the red part you circled?
So
The
this
circled
red
part.
part was basically an increment operator, a decrement operator. So if you want to do I is equal to I plus 1, in Python you use the operator plus equals 1. Okay. But if you want to do I is equal to I minus 1, then you use the decrement operator, which basically says I is equal to um, this operator. Okay. So this is a special operator, and it's sort of like a plus or a minus, but it basically avoids writing the I twice. Okay.
So this operator is optional, right? We can also use the traditional way of I is
Yes.
equal to this.
Yes, absolutely. So when we get into programming, as I'll show you in the Python programming today, we can practice some of these operators as well over there. Okay.
Sir, is there any possibility that you can upload these slides on LMS?
Yes, those are already uploaded. So the previous lecture slides have already been uploaded, and also the online lecture is available to you. So if you're not familiar with that, please log into LMS. Anything that I put onto LMS is also emailed to you. If you didn't get that email, find out why you're not getting those emails. So I hope everybody else is on board with those things.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, in the last class, you told me that we will use the ID for Python, Jupyter. Sir, why aren't we using PyCharm?
Okay, so PyCharm is a very good option. It's just a personal choice. I mean, I started off with using different ID. PyCharm is, of course, very popular as well. So if you want, you can use PyCharm, but I need to standardize this course. Okay, but
Yes, sir.
yes, you could just as well use PyCharm. A lot of courses are actually based on PyCharm. Okay,
Couldn't find the download link for the Jupyter. So when
so
you will
that
start the programming?
that will be given to you in the first homework assignment, and I will tell you exactly how to download, and I will ask you to download Anaconda, which is a framework, and within that you will get Jupyter and all of that. Okay, so we'll be talking about that later
Okay,
on.
sir. Thank
Okay,
you.
so let's go on. This was last week's lecture, and now, as I said, in the first 4 lectures, I would like to introduce each one of the class. So today, I'd like to introduce class number 5777. So I'm going to ask, as in the last lecture, for you to simply make sure that your video is on and you turn your mic on, and then you introduce only 3 things: your name, the school from which you came, and thirdly, any interest that you might like to share with others. So the question again is, do you think this is a good algorithm, or it seems to be an inefficient algorithm? And can we do better? And again, introduce your name, just say your name, and then go ahead.
Muhammad Bilal.
Yeah, Bilal, go ahead.
I think it's a very slow algorithm because in worst case scenario we have to search through all the elements of the list.
Okay, very good. So that's absolutely true. True, what Bilal has just said is that it doesn't seem to be a very good algorithm, because you see, if you're trying to search for the number 6 over here, and suppose that n is extremely large. I mean, n, for example, could be the entire population of Pakistan, right? So if you have 200 million people, and if you're trying to search whether a person, Muhammad Bilal, for example, exists in the Nadra database, then you would actually have to start from number 1, from index number 1 or 0, and you would have to go through 1, 2, 3, all the way up till 200 million or whatever the number of the population is, to be able to figure out. And that could take an extremely long time to be able to figure out whether this individual exists in the database or not. Okay, so it doesn't seem to be a very good algorithm. And then later on today, we will try to see if we can actually do better. But you mentioned something which is the worst case scenario. So when we again talking about, if you remember, we spoke about two ways in which you could determine the efficiency of an algorithm. One is the amount of time it takes, and the secondly, it's the amount of space taken. Now, the amount of space taken is something that we'll talk about later on, not right away, when we look at more complex algorithms. But in this case, we're basically looking at the amount of time taken to run the algorithm. And when we're talking about the amount of time taken, then basically we will generally refer to as the worst case scenario. Okay. So in the previous case, let's talk about the worst case scenario. Okay. So in the worst case, how long will this take in terms of the number of iterations you'd have to go? And we will generally refer to it as in terms of n. So as n becomes larger and larger, how many iterations would you have to go through this to be able to determine whether x exists or not? And I think that was, yeah. So the worst case scenario would be n iterations, right? I think this has already been answered. So, and if n is very large, then obviously that's not very efficient. What's the best case, by the way?
So we could put it in ascending order. Oh, okay.
Okay, no, just the unordered list. What's the best case scenario?
So n is equal to 0.
Yeah, so basically n is equal to, basically you can say that in one iteration, you could get the answer, right? So one iteration in which the value that you're looking for is in the 0th index. And so you would immediately say, this is great. And what would be the average case? The average case.
N is equals to 2 on the
Sorry?
second indexing. I mean to say that it would mean n is equals to 2.
Okay, does anybody have another suggestion?
Sir,
Average of number of
Shahir.
iteration.
Ji, Shahir, go ahead.
N upon 2 iterations.
Okay, so Shahir has answered n upon 2. That is correct, because basically when you talk about average, now if you look at the list, let's say you have this list. Now x could be anywhere. Okay, it could be here, it could be here, it could be here, anywhere. Now on average, when you're starting from one end to the other, just intuition tells you that sometimes you will find it right at the beginning, sometimes you'll find it right at the end. And on average, you might have to traverse the entire list about halfway through. Okay, so if you're traversing the list halfway through, then you can see that the average case would be n upon 2. Okay, so that I hope is somewhat intuitively obvious to all of you. All right. So this is how we determine the efficiency of an algorithm. And so in the best case, as I said, it's one iteration. In the worst case, it's n iterations. And on average, it is n upon 2 iterations. Now, when we're talking about the complexity of an algorithm, we are going to use something called a big O notation. Okay, so this is a big O. Now, what does this mean? A big O basically refers to the worst case scenario. Okay, and it refers to in terms of n, the size of the database, or the size of what you're looking at.
Excuse me, sir, ये iteration का मतलब समझ नहीं आ रहा.
Say that again. Ji Hamza, what was your question again?
Sir, could you please define iteration once again?
Iteration.
Sir,
Okay, good.
जी.
So what is, so again, if you don't understand any word that I'm using or a term, please ask me. Okay, don't be shy, because this is a very basic course and it doesn't assume any background in computer science. If you don't understand what some term is, just ask me. So, and there's no silly question, just ask me. The only perhaps silly question would be something that I've already explained repeatedly, in which case I would refer you to go back and listen to the lecture, the recorded lecture, okay? But if something I haven't explained, then please do ask me. So what is an iteration? So iteration basically means that when you start and you're going through this list, if you see you're going back, and then somehow at some point you're going back again, okay? So this loop, and you might be going through this loop several times. So every time you go through this loop, yeah, that is called an iteration. Iteration, okay? And you might be making different iterations. So in some cases, in this case, there's only one loop possible, okay? But in other cases, there might be different types of loops. But an iteration, I hope that's clear now. An iteration is one cycle around this entire code. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so so we're basically taking, in the worst case, we're going through n iterations. In other words, we will have to go through this loop n times. Okay, because we start from I is equal to 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and eventually, when we get to the fourth iteration, we find out that list sub 4 is equal to x, and that's when we stop. Okay, so that's what I mean by iterations. So so this is not a very good algorithm. And again, the notation that we're going to use is refers to as a big O, okay? As opposed to a little o, which we won't talk about, but a big O notation is referred to as an order of n, okay? This is how it's written. So it could be order of n, it could be order of n squared, it could be order of log n, and so on, okay? But let's just forget about these other terms. We'll introduce those later on. But order of n simply means that the worst case scenario is that it will take n iterations to go through and find out a number which is perhaps in the most, in the least obvious place. Okay, so I hope this notation is clear. If not, we'll look at other examples and this might become clear later on. Okay. So now I'm going to stop here with the high-level concepts, and I'm going to go a little low-level, and I'm going to actually illustrate how to do a little bit of programming. Okay, and I'm going to use Python programming, and I'm going to switch over here to my Jupyter screen.
So what's the difference between high level and low level programming?
Okay, so a high level simply means that, yeah, that's a good question. When I say high level, this is sort of a high level, okay? It means that this is simply a logical illustration of how a human being can actually understand the operation of the logic of the algorithm, okay? Computers won't be able to understand this. So if you take this this chart, okay, and if you try to feed it into a computer, the computer will obviously not be able to understand it, okay? Some programs do, by the way, which could be extremely intelligent, but normal computers, in fact, 99.9% of computers languages will not be able to understand a flow chart, okay? A flow chart is only useful for humans, for us humans. And simply because we understand how a flow of the logic of the program actually is flowing, okay? But a low level, and I'll use these terms in different ways, but when I say there is a high level description of the algorithm, and now we're talking about a lower level implementation of the algorithm, what I mean is that now we're actually going to get into an algorithm which is implemented. Okay, and this, you can actually run this on a particular programming language and it'll actually execute. Okay, the previous flow chart cannot be executed. Okay, so I hope that is somewhat clear. All right. So let's, I hope everybody can see this Jupyter screen which says lecture 2A.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Yes,
this is a programming environment. And you will get familiar with this in the first homework assignment, which is going to be given out today, and in which I'll actually ask you to, it will be very simple. As long as you have a computer and an internet, you should be able to install this. Okay, it will take some space in your computer, about 3 GB, if I'm not mistaken, to install the entire Anaconda, which is the framework. And then we're going to be using a particular programming language, which is called Python. Okay, so if you see over
Sir?
here, yeah.
Sir, could it be installed on Linux?
Yes, it can be done on Linux as well. Absolutely, it can. But you will, you will have to follow a slightly different set of instructions for that. It won't be very different, but when you go to that particular site for Anaconda, it will ask you to download. And the default, well, it'll simply ask you whether you want to download on Windows or some other platform. And if you choose another platform, then it should be able to do it on Linux as well. Okay, so
Yes, sir.
that
Thank
should be possible. But it may be a little bit more tricky than Windows. But if you're already familiar with Linux, I'm sure it's not going to be difficult. All right. So once you've installed this, you would be able to, and the first homework assignment, I'm going to ask you to actually run some of this code, and you'll be required to send me your screenshots to just show that you've actually installed it and run it, and you've run it. Okay. So let's take a look at the Jupyter environment. What you'll see.
Sir, I'm sorry, I'm pretty sure I'm repeating this, but you're going to send the link of downloading this Anaconda with the homework assignment.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I'll give you YouTube links to YouTube videos, and you'll simply be required to follow those YouTube videos. Okay. And you can choose any other videos as well. So that'll be somewhat explained in the homework assignment.
All right. Thank you.
So, so let's take a look at this. When you start a program, there's each line. It can be preceded with a hash code. So if you see this hash or pound as it's referred to, it simply means that the program is not going to look at that. That's simply comments. So I'm saying CSE 145, Introduction to Computing, Fall 2021, Lecture 2A. And then I'm simply saying Hello World program in Python. Now, when you see Hello World, this is sort of a code in all programming languages. When you want to be able to run and execute the simplest version of a program, just search for Hello World version of that. Okay, so if you're learning Java programming in Introduction to Programming, then search for Hello World version for Java. Okay, and you'll see that the Hello World Java program is somewhat complex. Now, Python in that sense is very simple. So Hello World in Python is literally a single line. Okay, all it says is it's going to print open parentheses and then these inverted commas and the term that you want to print. Okay, if you want to print hi guys, you can do that. If you want to print bye, you can do that. And once you've written this down over here, so I can write something else over here. So for example, if I want to write hello, good night. So it'll print that out as well. Okay, so I haven't executed this program yet. The way I'm going to execute it is I'm going to, and each one of these is, by the way, a cell. Okay, so when I want to execute it, I'm going to click on this. It will say run cell selected below. Okay, so if I'm over here, it's going to run this cell. If I'm over here, then it's going to run that cell. Okay, so let's run this cell. And well, as you expected, it says hello world over here. Hi guys, bye, good night. Okay, so and you can run this repeatedly. So if I change this to good morning, good morning. If I run it again, it'll simply say good morning. Okay, so that's your first piece of code. Quite simple. All right. Now,
sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, there's no header required or anything like
no,
in C++. You have to write history.
So that's the beauty of Python. Okay, it's extremely simple, and it doesn't require any headers. It doesn't require any parentheses. Well, it does require some parentheses in some cases, but it doesn't require a lot of parentheses, as you'll see later on. Okay, so if you compare it to Java, or if you compare it to C or C++, or even Visual Basic or something, it's much simpler. Okay, but it's extremely powerful. In fact, today it's probably the most powerful language and the most common language, simply because it's used by Google. So it's become extremely popular in the recent past.
Sir, is Python case sensitive?
Yes, it is case sensitive. So if you write print over here with a capital P, see what happens. Okay, it'll say an error. It doesn't understand because print has to be in lowercase. Okay, so it'll give you an error and tell you which line it's in. If you forget parentheses and you run it, it'll give you an error. Okay, so so it does have a certain syntax. So every programming language has a certain syntax, and the syntax over here for the print statement is that everything that you want to print has to be inside the brackets. Okay, right.
Sir,
yeah.
I wanted to ask, इसके जो text लिखा है, इसके जो text लिखा है, hello world.
जी.
अगर हम इस text के अंदर ये quotation marks या brackets को include करेंगे, तो क्या वो पाइथन जो है वो रिकॉग्नाइज करेगा अर्लीस्ट ब्रैकेट को, मतलब आउट हो जाएगा हमारा कोड, or is it possible to add
So
brackets?
the question was, if you remove what exactly did you ask? If I remove
The
what?
question is जैसे print के बाद हमने bracket करा, फिर quotation mark करा, हमने तब text लिखा, उसके बाद quotation mark फिर bracket. If our text includes quotation marks or brackets, will that mess with the code?
I'm not sure if exactly follow, but let's say if you try to print this, okay? And if you run this, it'll give you an error because it doesn't understand what world is, okay? World is not defined. So anything inside these quotation marks is basically something that it's going to ignore, and it's going to reproduce that exactly as it is, okay? And if
So
you...
what it's saying is, in inverted commas, use parentheses inside the inverted commas.
Okay, so if you do this, then it's going to print it exactly as it is, okay? And you can experiment with these things, okay? Once you've got it running, you can experiment with different things. Actually, I don't want to spend too much time on the syntax of this because I'm trying to explain it to you at a relatively high level. When you go into Introduction to Programming course, that's where you really want to learn the details of that language. But at this point, I don't want to spend too much time on the syntax, but basically try to follow the basic concept over here, okay? And again, once you've got this running on your computer, you can practice with a lot of things. And if you run into any problem, so for example, if you run into a problem and you want to figure out how does print work, so what you could simply do is you could go into Google and say, how do I print in Python? Okay, now Python 3 and Python 2 are a little different. So you may want to be able to say, how do I print in Python 3? So if you look at this, it'll simply tell you, okay, how do I print? I haven't looked at this page as well, but you will get a lot of examples, okay? One of the better examples that I would suggest is a W3 school, okay? So if you look down here, you might be able to see something which is in W. Don't find that. Geeks for Geeks is also good, but W3 schools, yeah, that's the one. So this is quite useful if you want to learn a particular language. It's got a lot of stuff. So for example, if you look over here, print, and then you can also try it yourself. So here you don't actually even need to have Python installed on your computer. You can simply run this and it'll show you the result right there and then. Okay, so it's an online, it'll actually, so if you say hello world, double exclamation marks, and if you run that again, it'll actually run it, okay? And if you mess up and if you forget, for example, the parentheses over here, and then if you try to run it, it'll give you an error, okay? So, so there are different ways in which you can actually learn a programming language, and W3 schools is something that is useful. Even I use it at different times, okay? So play around with this. Now let's take a look at the next concept, which is variables. Now, a variable is something by which you can actually, so for example, n over here is a variable, and you can assign it some number, okay? So if you assign it the number 2, then n is going to be initially a variable that you can refer to it. It can change as you go through the code, and it's going to have some significance that we're going to talk about as you go forward in terms of memory and so on. But what you can do is you can print this n value, and let's take a look at how this code works. So if I run this, you can simply see that print, when you said print n, it printed the number 2. And when you said print n is equal to inside parentheses, inside the quotation marks, then it printed this out as it was, and then it printed the number n, okay? So now, for example, if I say n is equal to 3.
Like last time.
Yeah.
Last time में सर कॉमा के बाद जो n लिखा हुआ है, मतलब ये क्या लॉजिक हुई, किस तरह से हुआ?
Okay, so let me explain this. So now you see that when you're doing a print statement, you can break it up as follows. Some of it earlier that you saw was in inverted commas, okay? Now that's going to be treated as it is. And after that, you can put a comma and you can put a variable. Okay. And now it's going to take out the value of the variable and it's going to print that. So here you see if I wrote something like n dot 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 and printed this out, it would print out exactly as it is because it was inside these inverted commas. But if I print n2 over here, guess what's going to happen? It's going to say, well, n2 is a variable, it hasn't been defined yet. Okay, so so that very briefly is what a variable is. Okay, again, when you go into introduction to programming, you'll learn in more detail what variables are and so on. Okay, so this is a very quick view of what a programming language is. Ajit.
Sir, ये data type defining करनी होती?
No, so again, in Python, you don't have to define the data type. Now, people might be confused as to what a data type is, so I don't want to go into that. But no, to answer your specific question, no, you don't have to define it. Okay.
So over here, wrote n is equal to 2. Does that store it as a string or integer?
Okay. It stores it as, and well, in Python, the storage is very complex. Okay. But it's basically a short answer is that it's going to store it as an integer. However, if you define it as a 2.0, it's going to store it as a floating point. Okay. But I don't want to get into all of these details because we haven't really talked about what is an integer and what is a floating point. Okay. So people who are already familiar with some of these concepts, please hold on to your questions and we'll get to that later on. Okay. So now let's take a look at another concept. Okay, so here what we're basically doing is we're printing. That's simple examples of how you can print something. Now let's look at something called an if condition. Now, if condition basically says that it's going to check the value of something. Okay, so initially I define n as equal to 1. All right, and now if you remember when I say double equals 2, it's going to be a comparison operator. So when you have if, and if you follow that with something which is going to return a true or a false. Okay, so when we're saying is n equal to 1, and in this case clearly n is equal to 1. So what it's going to do is it's going to do things which are after this colon. And in Python, if you put in a tab, for example, over here, if you put in a tab over here, it's going to execute everything after which is tabbed. Okay, so in other words, it's going to execute everything from here till here. All right. So this is the simplicity of Python. It doesn't require, it simply works in a very simple way. Okay, in other languages, you'll see that the syntax is a lot more complicated. So it's going to, if n is equal to 1, it's going to print n is equal to 1, and it's going to print done. If n is not equal to 1, it's going to print n is not equal to 1, and it's going to print n done in else loop. Okay, so can somebody tell me what, if I execute this, what should the output be?
N is equal.
Sir, it will be n is equal to 1 and done.
Okay, so again, try to speak your name first. I know people forget, but say your name first so that I can tell you who to speak, so that 3 people don't speak at the same time. So Muhammad Dawood, please go ahead.
Sir, it will n is equal to 1 and done. This will be printed as n is equal to 1.
Okay, so let's check that out. That I've changed and I've just executed that. It says n is equal to 1 and it says done. Okay, now clearly if I change this to n is equal to 2, what's going to happen? Can somebody else answer that?
Sir, may I?
So here, yeah.
Sir, it will print n is not equal to 1 and done in else loop.
Okay, great, Daniel, thanks. So let's run this now, and it's going to say n is not equal to 1, done in else loop. Okay, so you can see it's fairly straightforward.
Can you please explain what the double equal sign mean again?
Okay, I've explained this a few times. This is a comparison operator. Okay, it's basically saying is n equal to 2 or not, as opposed to a single equals to. That is an assignment operator. So when you're doing a single operator, n is equal to 1 is basically saying n is going to be equal, n is going to now have the value of 1. Okay, so if you say what is n, or if you say print n, okay, then it's going to print the value of n. So you can see that it's printed the value of 1. This is an assignment operator, okay? And so it's sort of like saying, suppose there's a person called Ahmad, and we say, there's a person in front of us, and we say, now your name is Ahmad, okay? So basically, we're assigning that person a name. Now, if we're doing this double equals to, basically, we're asking, we're saying, is your name Ahmad? Okay, so that's sort of the difference between an equals to and a double equal to. Okay, right. So,
tab does before the print. What does
sorry?
tab do? You said if you
Sir, I
press
have a
tab,
question.
it before the print statement.
Can you repeat the question, Maz?
So you said something like if you tab before the print statement, it does something. I missed that part.
Yeah. So basically, that's a good point. So what if I didn't have this tabbed? Okay, so let's see what happens in this case. There's a problem now because it doesn't know how to evaluate this. You see, an else has to be followed, an if has to be followed by an else. So because this is not tabbed, it's not part of this loop. Okay, so it has to be tabbed. Everything that you want it to be done inside the if loop has to be with a tab before it. Okay, you can practice this again. So for example, what if, okay, so here's a question. What if I make n is equal to 1 and I run this code? Can somebody tell me what the answer would be in this case?
Maybe it will work.
Okay, good. So it will work, but what will be the answer now?
N is equal to 1, done.
Sir?
G Anusha.
Sir, maybe it will always.
Okay.
Maybe it will
I'm going
always
to
print
now.
done in else loop.
I'm going to start being now a little mean because I'm saying it several times. You have to say your name before you answer. Please remember that you have to say your name. Otherwise, this class is not going to be very efficient. So now, and I'm not going to listen to you if you're not answering, if you're not saying your name first. So can somebody tell me what will the answer be in this case? I didn't hear your name.
Sir, Musab?
Musab, go ahead.
Sir, I think it's going to run, but the last statement, print done in else loop, is going to run separately.
Exactly.
It's not going to be a part of the if or else.
Exactly right. So in other words, so tell me now what the answer would be. So you've got the concept right. Now what's the answer going to be?
So the answer is going to be n is equal to 1, done, and then also done in else loop will be written.
Exactly right. Why is that? Because else was tabbed, and this is what's going to happen if n is not equal to 1. Okay, but this is going to be done regardless of whether this is outside the loop now. So this was the loop for this was sort of the if then else condition, and regardless of what happens over here, it's going to execute this. Okay, so if n is equal to 1, it's going to execute this anyway, done in else loop. If n is equal to 2, sorry, if n is equal to 2 over here, now what's going to happen? Can somebody tell me? Somebody else.
Sir, my name is Mustafa.
Yeah.
I think it will run and it will print n is not equal to 1 and also done in else loop.
Yeah, good. So by the way, you don't have to say my name is Mustafa. You can just say Mustafa and then go ahead and answer. Okay. So very good. So it's going to say n is not equal to 1 because it n is equal to 2. It did this check. Is n equal to 1? No. If it wasn't, then it's going to go through the else loop and it's going to say n is not equal to 1. Now it's done in this part. And now next it's simply going to do this. Okay. So this is outside of this if then else condition. Okay. So now it's simply saying done is done in else loop, which is kind of a misstatement, but that's what it's going to do. Okay. So I hope you understand the if.
Sir, Abdurrahman here.
Else.
Can I ask a question?
G Abdurrahman.
Okay, if you put space in n is equal to 2 or n is equal to 1, would it make any difference?
Over here, no, it shouldn't make a difference. Over here, if you print this, it'll still run. Okay. But if you put a space over here, then it won't run. Why? Because this is a special operator. Okay, and you can put spaces anywhere else. All of this will this will be okay, but it won't run if this has a problem. Okay, so you can experiment with these things on your own.
Rafe, I have a question.
Ji, Rafi.
Sir, in the start of the program, we assigned a value to n.
Yeah.
But is it possible for a value to be assigned while the program is running? Because for
Yeah.
a user, the program would be running.
Yeah. Yes. And we'll get to that in a few minutes. Okay, so you can change the value. And you saw that I changed it as well. So over here, I changed n is equal to 2 from n is equal to 2 to n is equal to 3. Okay.
Excuse me.
Ji.
I have another question, Shahid.
Ji, Shahid.
So if we just use one equal sign, would that matter in the if statement?
No, that won't work because if you did this,
essentially it's just saying
going to give an error because it is looking for it's looking for something which is going to evaluate to a true or false. Okay, it has to have a comparison operator. Okay, you could say n is equal to 1, or you could say n is greater than 1. This will also run. Okay, you could say n is less than 1. Okay, it would still run. You could even say n is less than equal to 1. That would still run. So all of these are comparison operators, and they would all run. Okay, but they would do different things, of course.
Right. And also another thing.
Ji.
In the
By the way, sorry, just to interrupt. I hope that everybody who's answering my questions is in the class 5777, I think, today. Okay. So let me just make sure which class is being done today. Yeah, 5777. Because I want to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance. So you can ask questions, but when I'm asking you a question, I would like students from the class 5777 to primarily be involved in the discussion today. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions any other questions? Yeah, there was a question from one of you.
Yes, sir. I am Timuzman Rashid. Sir, I wanted to ask the last statement, print, done, and else loop. How did you separate it from the else loop?
Okay,
I mean,
simply because of the tab. Okay, so if I wanted to make it part of this, I would put it over here. Okay, so if it's part of this in the tabbed thing, then it will be part of this else. Okay. All right.
So you press the button of tab to separate it from the loop.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So next, let's go through something called an iteration. Okay. Now, this was simply a conditional statement. Now, an iteration, as we saw earlier, is sort of a loop, and you're going through that loop several times. So this is called looping. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a simple syntax. And I'm going to say for I in range 1, 5, colon, do this. Okay. So basically what we expect is that I is going to have different values. I is going to start off with the value of 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. It will stop before 5. Okay. So can somebody tell me what is going to be the output of this?
Kunal here, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, very good. So Kunal, let's see if this is true. So it's going to say I is equal to, and then it's going to print out the actual value of I. So I is equal to 1, I is equal to 2, I is equal to 3, I is equal to 4. Okay, it stopped before 5. So this is a special command, special operation in a special function rather in Python range. Okay, so all of these are special terms. So far we've come across special terms. So print here is a special term, and if is a special term, else is a special term, and for I and range is a special term. Okay, now this I could be replaced by anything else. So you could say for n in range 1 to 5. Just a second, I'm sorry. Let me just show you I, and if I did this, then can somebody tell me what would be the output?
1, 5.
I'm not hearing your answer.
Sir, the output will be 1, 2, 3, 4.
I'm still not hearing anybody.
Sir, Daud here, sir. I think it
Daud,
will be wrong.
yes.
You did not change the I in that
Yeah.
inverted commas.
Okay. So Daud is basically the reason why I said I'm not hearing you is because I was hearing you, but I wasn't hearing you because you weren't saying your name. Okay. So anybody who speaks up without saying their names, I'm not going to listen to them. So Daud basically said that it's going to return an error. Now, do people agree with that? Does anybody disagree with that?
Yes.
Yes,
But
sir.
Bilal,
Yes, sir. It will return the same answer.
Same answer, sir.
I'm not hearing anybody.
but Bilal,
Bilal, yes.
I don't agree with him because I think that n would be assigned like 1, 2, 3, 4 as the same as I, but it will still say I equals to 1, I equals to 2, I is
Exactly.
equal to
So
3,
Bilal
I
is
equals to
absolutely
4.
right. So let's just run this. So you see, it ran exactly right. There is no error in the program, except that because this is inside the inverted commas, it's going to be printed as it is. It's not going to evaluate it. Okay. But n is going to be evaluated. It's going to look for the value because this is a variable, and it's going to say n has a specific value. Okay. So I hope that sort of makes sense. I could have
I
actually.
have a question.
I have a question too. My name is Suhaib.
Yeah. So
सर आज के ब्रैकेट में 1,5 लिखा हुआ है and I की values में 1 include हो रहा है. Why isn't 5 included in the values?
Okay, so that's how the function range is defined. Okay, so we can't question that those are the people the people who wrote the Python compiler have defined that range is going to be. Now, if you want to look it up and you want to see how is range defined, so you could say range in Python. Okay, so let's see how is range defined. So you could go into W3 schools, that might help you. So this will say that create a sequence of numbers from 0 to 5 and print it out. So it'll give you different examples. Okay. So basically, you can look at the definition of the word range, and it will tell you. Okay. So this is how it's defined. You start from some value. So for example, if I wanted to go from the numbers 10 to 15, what would I do? I would simply say 10 over here, and I would say I want to go up to 15. So what would I put over here? I'd put 16. Yeah. So now it will go from 10 to 15 because that's how range is defined. Okay. This function range is defined to go from the value 10, and it'll keep on incrementing it until it gets to 16, but it won't actually execute when it's actually 16. It'll stop before that. Okay. So that was iterations and looping.
Sir,
जी
सर
जी
सर ये मतलब जो रेंज होगी उससे एक दफा कम चलेगी लूप
जी exactly so the range is an upper limit. Okay, so it'll stop before that. So now let's take a look at another example.
सर ये कामा के बाद वेरिएबल सर मोहम्मद हमजा सर
जी हमजा
सर कामा के बाद वेरिएबल लगाना लाजमी है
जी so if you put well, it depends. I think it may not be compulsory. So if you don't put this, it will start from 0 and it'll go up to 9. Okay. So these are details that I'm not going to go into, but if you're interested, you can explore this further. Okay.
Shahid.
Ji Shahid.
You will print I is equal to comma and what if you don't write the comma?
What if I don't write the comma? Let's see what happens. It's going to return an error. Okay, because it needs to have a comma between these two. Okay.
Sir Tariq.
Ji Tariq.
Is this like a graph in sort of way?
Is it like a graph? Not exactly. I mean, I don't want to go into that, but no, the short answer is not really a graph. Okay. So as you go through this course, you'll get to know, get a better understanding. Okay. But I'm giving you sort of a very quick view of this, and as you go through, hopefully the next few lectures, you'll get a better understanding. All right. But as long as you can follow what's going on over here so far, you're in good shape. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Right. So now let's take a look at this. Now range can also take 3 parameters. So you can see that it can take 1 argument. These are called arguments, by the way. So when you have a function, it can take 1 argument or 2 arguments or 3 arguments. Okay, sorry, I messed that up. So if I say 1 comma 10, so now earlier you saw that I was giving it 2 arguments. One was the lower limit and the other was the upper limit. And now I'm giving it 3 arguments. In that case, what will happen is that it will start from 1, it will go up until almost 10, until 9, but it will also increment in certain, it will increment by the number 3. Okay, so let's see what this does. So it started from 1, then it incremented I by 3, which became 4. Then it incremented by another 3, which became 7. And then it incremented by another 3, and it became 10. And since 10 was at the limit, so it stopped. Okay. So now what if I do 2? Can somebody tell me what will the output be in this case?
Sir, I'm going. Sir,
Muhammad
the
Bilal.
output
Muhammad
would
Bilal.
increment.
Bilal?
Yeah. So the output would be to start from 1, then the next one would be 3, then 5, then 7, then 9.
Okay, good. So
And
Bilal
stop
got
at
it
9.
right, and it'll stop at 9. Okay, so you can experiment with this.
So,
Now,
sir, Daniel, I have a question.
Daniel.
So the third parameter means the difference between 2 numbers.
Yes, so it will. So if you simply wanted it to do the default, which is 1, this will simply increment it by 1. Okay, so this is what this was. The default parameter, the third argument was actually 1. Okay, I hope that's clear.
I have a question.
Aisha, yeah. Okay, so let me explain it again. So suppose that, not sure how to explain it in a more simple way. There are 3 arguments, all right? There is, let's say if I write this as n x, y, and z, okay? And suppose that I define x is equal to 1, and y is equal to 10, and z is equal to 2. Okay, I don't know if I'm making it more complex or not, but basically it takes 3 parameters and it starts this loop with the smallest parameter. So it'll start at 1, then it will keep on going through this loop and it will increment the value of I. Okay, this is a variable which will keep on incrementing. And then the amount that it is incrementing is by this value. Okay, so in this case, it's going to increment by 2. So let's see how this works. This goes 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. If I make z is equal to 4, it will go 1, and then it will increment I by 4. It will go to 5, and then it will increment it by another 4. It will go up to 9. Okay. So if it's still not clear, I would suggest just go through these concepts in your own way when you run the program. Try different things out, and hopefully it will become clearer as you go through this course. Okay.
Sir, Abdurrahman here. Can I ask?
Yeah, Abdurrahman.
Sir,
Can we
what
say that
is
C is a step?
Abdurrahman first. Go ahead, Abdurrahman.
Sir, I was saying that if we write x, y, z as 1, 10, 0, would it make any difference?
1, 10, and 0. Oh, that's a tough question. I don't know what. Honestly, I don't know what this will do, but let's try it. I think it will give an error because incrementing by z implies that it will go into what is called an infinite loop. Okay. In other words, it's not incrementing. And you remember when I told you about every algorithm must have a starting condition. Okay. It starts somewhere, and then it must have some way to stop. If it doesn't know how to stop, it will go through an infinite loop. And if it's going through an infinite loop, then sometimes programs will not actually run. Okay, so if you put this as 0 over here, it will not accept it.
And
okay, so
same
the
would
third
happen
argument
if we put -1.
Okay, very good question. That's my next example. So let's take a look at the next example, which is a -1.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
सर मुझे ये print function समझ नहीं आ रहा.
I am not
I
hearing
is
you.
equal to I वाला.
I'm not hearing
Sir,
you.
Sir, can you hear me now?
I am not
Take your
hearing
name.
you.
Sir, I am Hamza.
Zarlish first, because she spoke her name first. Zarlish.
Okay.
You have to remember to please speak your name. Otherwise, I'm not going to listen to you. Zarlish, go ahead.
I have a question. So can we say that Z is just a step?
Z is just a what?
Step.
Yes, so it's a step, exactly. So that's very well put, way of putting it. It's simply the step value. Okay, so if the step is 1, it's going to step by 1. If the step is 5, it's going to step by 5. Okay, it's like going up the stairs. That's how many steps you're going to jump. Okay, good way. Ji Hamza.
Print function समझ नहीं आ रहा. Print bracket open I is equal.
I think we've gone through this a little bit before, so just rewind the lecture when you listened to this earlier. I don't want to repeat something that I've already covered several times. So just listen to the lecture when you see the recording. Just go back and listen to how the print works. And again, you can experiment with these again. Okay. And again, if you still don't understand it, look at W3 schools. A very good way to actually understand these. Okay. All right. So now let's keep going on. Now the next thing I'm going to do is, okay, so let's stop over here because this is a little bit more complex, defining a function. And now let's take a look at how.
So negative wala reh gaya. Daniel,
Achha, I'm sorry, negative wala reh gaya. Okay, very good. Thanks for reminding me. So can somebody tell me now when you put a negative value, how would this work? Can you try to figure out?
Sir, Daniel here. Can I tell?
Ji Daniel. Ji Daniel.
So it will decrease by 1.
Yes, very good. Now, if it's decreasing by 1, the first argument actually has to be larger than the second argument, right? Would you agree to that? Okay.
Yes,
so if
sir.
the first argument is larger than the second argument, tell me what the output should be now.
Myro.
Arya, go ahead.
5432.
5432. Very good. So let's see if that is Maria's right or not. 5432. Exactly right. It stopped at before 1. Okay. And there's something for you to experiment with. I don't know if this works. I haven't really done this. What if this is, let's say, 9? I don't know if this will work. No, this will not work.
So Tariq here. Shouldn't it be 4321 because 5 should still be the upper bound because 5 is still a bigger number.
No, so the way range is defined, Tariq, is that if this number is the step is actually negative, then the first argument has to be larger than the second argument. Okay, and it will start from the first argument. It will keep going down. It's like going down the steps. Okay.
Is this a mathematical thing, right?
Yeah. Who's got that? Who was that?
Fawaz. Yeah, Mr.
Fawaz.
What if we didn't have a third argument?
If we didn't have a third argument, that's a good question. Let's see what happens. So it's not going to work. Okay. Yeah, I haven't experimented with all the syntax as well because it's actually it started off with 5, and then it said is 5 less than 1, and since it didn't give an error, by the way. Okay, so it said is 5 less than 1, and it said no, and so it actually didn't even execute the first iteration. Okay, so I hope that was clear. So anyway, experiment with different things and see how it operates. Now we were going through the negative values, and I think we covered that as well. Okay.
Yeah. So my name is Ryan. The code above this one, can't you keep the number 1 more than the upper bound, which is 10 in this case, so that it runs from 1 to 10 like properly?
Okay, yeah, sure. So you can take any number. I mean, for example, if you wanted to go from 1 till 10, then all you would do is simply go from 1 till 11. Okay. It would go from 1 till 10. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So now,
Sure.
G, what was your name again?
Zardesh.
Zardesh, G, go ahead.
So I have a question like here you have assigned x a value, y a value, and z a value, but like you have used x and y but not z. Doesn't it matter? Like you have assigned the value twice, I believe. Like you've written one twice.
Yeah. So yeah, it doesn't really matter. In some programming languages, it might give you a warning that you've assigned a variable and you're not really using it. Okay, but it's not an error. All right. So even though z has not been used in this code, z been assigned, but it's not really been used. So it's not an error as such in the programming language. Okay, good question.
Okay. So Abdurrahman here.
Yeah, Abdurrahman.
So what if we remove comma 1 and write z is equal to 1 as well?
If you write z is equal to 1 over here, that will be an error, I believe. Yeah. So it's not looking for an assignment over here. It's looking for some number. It's looking for an integer, actually.
No, so I was asking only x comma y.
Yeah, that will work as well. Now tell me can somebody tell me what this would give?
Sir, Dawood here.
Ji Dawood.
I think it will be 1 to 9.
Yeah, so it will simply give 1 to 9 because if the third parameter is missing, it will assume that the third parameter is the step size by default. That's what is called a default. The default value will be 1. Okay.
Sir, Saad here, I have a question.
Yes, Saad.
Just like D has a default value of 1, what would be the default value of X and Y? For example, we can just write range and then a single number. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly. Good question. So we looked at that earlier. If you did this, then this is basically the default value is going to be for the second parameter. In other words, sorry, the default value will be for the X parameter, the first parameter. So this will now, can somebody tell me what this would give me? Let's say if this is 5, what should it give me?
Sir Abdul Rafi.
Ji Abdul Rafi.
It's going to give 0 to 5.
0 to 5. I think it's actually, yeah, you're absolutely, well, 0 to 4, because this is going to be used as the upper bound. Okay. So this will be equivalent to saying 0, 5. Okay. So if you eliminate the first, if you just give it one argument, it's going to assume, so it's somewhat intelligent, somewhat intuitive as well. If you just want to go from 0 to some number, then you don't have to specify 0. Okay. So these are things that you can explore on your own and figure out how exactly it works. G, who was that again? Musab Ji.
Musab. Sir, so you from the 5 likha hai, this is standing in for y or x?
This is for y. So this is basically x comma y comma z. So this was the value for y. If you simply give one parameter, it would be the y value. If you give two parameters, it would be x and y. If you give three parameters, it would be x, y, and z. Okay.
Sir, Nidal here.
Ji Nidal.
So what is that value written at the extreme left of your cell, IN57?
Okay, so this is a good question. This is basically, now the way Jupyter works, and this is very peculiar to Jupyter, is that let's take a look at how this thing works. Now a kernel is something that we'll learn later on, but just you assume that this is something that we're going to use. A kernel can be restarted and cleared output. So if you want to clear everything that you've written, you can restart and clear all outputs. Now that doesn't mean that the actual code will be erased. If you notice, all the code is still there that we've been looking at. However, the output has now been removed. And it's as if you have just started this program and this program has never been executed. Okay. Now, if I execute this the first time around, it's going to give it the number 1. So basically that means that this is the first cell that is executed. Okay. If I run this, this will be the second cell that was executed. Okay. Now, if I skip this and I execute this, this will be the third cell that is executed. And you notice that this is blank, which means that this cell has never been executed. And if I execute this now, it will say that this is the fourth cell. So you now see it's giving you the sequence of cells in the order in which they were executed. 1, 2, and then I skipped this, and then I did 3, and then it came 4. Okay, so I hope that's clear to you. And if you run this again, so if I run this again, it will give it number 5. In other words, this was now the 5th cell that was re-executed. There was a question.
जी sir, Musab.
Musab ji.
I was asking कि हमने इसको numbers जो दिए 1 through 5, can it ऐसा कर सकते हैं कि we write another code that says run 1, then run 3, then run 2, then run 4, then 5.
Okay, not in Jupyter, not that I'm aware of. Okay, so Jupyter basically is an interactive environment. Okay, it's not. There will be, if you, when you install Anaconda, you will see that Jupyter is just one of the options that you're getting. There's also something called Spider, which is the more traditional way of executing it, and that's quite different. But we'll look at that later on. But the short answer is that no, this will depend on where you place your cursor and when you execute it. Okay, so you can't change that right now. However, if you're writing a long program, you can embed all of that inside that same program. Okay, so this is one cell, and it's going to execute it in this particular sequence. It will execute the first line, second, third, all the way up till the 8th line. Okay.
Sir, yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, decimals में increment कर सकते हैं?
Say that again.
Decimals में increment कर सकते हैं, जैसे आपने negative कर लिया.
Decimals में increment कर सकते हैं. That's a good question. I think range doesn't do it. It might do it. You'll have to double check it. Okay. So you could check, for example, you could say, can range in Python work with decimals? Okay. So you can try to get these answers. So range only works with integers. Okay, so you can see how it's fairly easy to, if you're not sure about questions, just you don't even have to ask me. You can just go online and just ask Google, and Google is your next best instructor.